Hi, I'm here today with Professor Karin Ronnerman from Gothenburg University in Sweden. Karin is one of the leaders in the world regarding action research. So what we thought we'd do is just have a chat today about action research, and particularly as it's undertaken in Sweden in educational settings. So this is pretty informal. We're just going to have a chat, we're recording it, and we hope it's interesting for you. So Karin, do you want to just give a little bit of background about yourself first?
Well, thankful first for coming to this studio and doing this interview. Yes, background, I'm trained for preschool and worked in a preschool for 12 years before I started studying my PhD. And at that time I was in a project about changing practices in primary school. And when I just finished and left my PhD or the thesis to the printer, I got in contact with Ken Zeichner from the US, and that opened up my interest in action research. Mm. So that was kind of what I found in my thesis. Suddenly there was a whole world of it outside that I didn't know about. Mm. And so after finishing my thesis, I got a scholarship, or I got some funding, so I could go to Ken Zeichner in Madison and spend a month there with him, and also with teachers doing action research in their schools and also in the district that was quite developed at that time. This was in 1995. So since then, I've continued with action research in different ways, particularly in collaboration with teachers in schools and preschools in Sweden.
So we know that action research in Sweden has a long history, much wider than just education, part of the fabric of society. Do you want to tell us just a little bit about action research in Sweden?
Yes, you can say action research has not a history in education in Sweden, but a history in work sciences, which is based on the idea is based on democracy, how all participants in a business, or all employed in a business, can take part in decision making, and how can you do that? So there was a lot of different projects going on, specifically with Norwegian researchers. Had some of these concepts that we use today about democratic dialogues and dialogue conferences as a way to organize a meeting where everybody's voices are being heard and everybody is getting informed of what is going on and can be part of this decision making, and also part of that meaning making in what change is about.
So one of the key things you said there is about democracy. Is a key part of it the democratic principles?
Yes.
And when you say democracy, you don't just mean about government and elections, you mean something broader than that?
Yeah, I mean, Sweden is one of these countries that have democracy, also democratic values in the curriculum for school and preschools. And by that it means it doesn't mean that you teach about it. It also is about how to act democratic in the schools. And as a student, but also as a teacher, how do you do that in teaching, but also in the social life around, which is within schools? Mm. So, yeah, so that's these values I think is important, and that connects very well to action research.
So you've mentioned there the connection to action research. What would you see as the key features of action research?
I think understanding is the most, how to develop understandings of your practices and the site where it takes place, but also understandings on how it's steered education. I mean, what you're doing in your school, how that is steered by different policies, rules, and from government and other people around you. So kind of it's not education not isolated in the classroom, how to teach. It's more than that, and action research for me is more than that.
So often when we think about action research, we think about cycles of, starting, plan, act, observed, reflect. And that's what we often think. Is that what action research is about?
I think that's the process of action research. I will not deny that action research also is about actions, but it can be too much focus on the actions, so you forget about the understandings. And that's when you talk about action research as just a method for teachers, a research method for teachers in the classrooms. And I think to be able to get these understandings, you also have to create communicative spaces where teachers can meet and reflect and share their understandings and their results of what they're doing to get a deeper understandings of the practices you're part of, but also the site where it takes place.
So you've mentioned a couple of times about the site and about learning about and understanding education in the school site. So you're saying it's something quite local, or is it?
Yeah, I think it's very local. Of course, every school is unique per se. It's the children who's going there, or the students who's there. It's the group of teachers who's working there. It's the principal who's working there. And this makes it a local site. And it's not transferable easy to another site. I think we have enough of evidence of that today.
Yeah.
That even if it works in Australia, it might not work in Sweden or in a town where I live. So that's also an understanding to see that you have to look at the problems, the site where you work, what is working here, what is not working, and have to find that problem and work with that problem instead of thinking, oh, they work with that in Australia, let's do the same thing here. If you want to change, you have to start with identifying what kind of problems do you have in this unique school.
So often here we talk about best practice. Is that something that would relate with action research or be at odds with action research?
I wouldn't say so. I think this best practice is a complicated concept because it comes from the industry or medicine. I mean, you need that to have evidence for something. And I suppose it works in that context, but not in education. As long as we have to deal with human beings and that we all are different, both culturally, ethically, and other ways, we have to we can't think there is one practice and or one best practice. But I really got into another concept. We used to play with this word of evidence-based practice. Another way to put it is to practice-based evidence. I mean, what are the evidence from my practice that I can use to further discuss what is happening here? But I also use another concept which is about a promising practice. That is something to strive for. And like this is something promising that is also sustainable. Because I suppose can't avoid that sustainability concept, but I don't think sustainability doesn't come with best practice. Something that best also have to be questioned one day.
And I know you've done a lot of work with middle leaders in educational settings. Can you talk about how action research relates to the work of middle leaders?
Yeah, actually it's kind of what really generated out of action research is my not understanding, but my experience of it. Having started courses in action research for teachers and then followed up later what happened, I was quite surprised that 4 years after there was about 80% still doing action research at their own sites, and that was I had 120 teachers that answered this questionnaire, and 67% of those had taken up a leadership in their own site because they were so convinced this is the way how to understand your own practice, but also be able to discuss it and with your colleagues. So they taken up a leadership and started these groups that they facilitated in their own schools. And later on in contact with you and other people here in Australia, we started to think of them as middle leaders, which is a concept that is really good in the definition we made it. It's a person that really is working in as a teacher, being among teaching, but also have a little responsibility of this of professional learning or professional development by facilitating their colleagues and organizing for that to happen. So it's not just that you facilitate one by one, but to organize communicative spaces for a lot of people or for colleagues to meet. And over time, I think that's the most important. It has to be regularly, it has to come back. In that way, you will get deeper understandings of both the practice and the site where it takes place.
Sometimes we've seen action research, which has been around for a long time, being taken up as sort of a mechanism to, as a way of doing something rather than the process has become what's important rather than the outcome of it. Can you talk about your concerns about that?
Yes, I can see a lot of that is happening in Sweden as well. And I would say it's not even the processes that become important, it's more like it becomes more instrumental. So it's going to, we have to do more actions. How many actions can we do? So it's kind of, I mean, I don't deny this activity and the actions are really important, but they are important for you to gather data, to understand what is happening, to analyze that and to discuss it and to be able to understand what is happening. Suppose that's the main thing. Why is this happening in this school and not in another school? How can we get to understand this and to learn more about it, to be able to change it?
So what might bad action research look like then?
Well, I would consider, I mean, Karin chemists in their book, they had 3 different versions of actions: the technical, the practical, and the emancipatory. And they were based on Habermas' 3 ways of knowledge. So the technical is more the scientific field. I mean, you like experiments, you get their answers, this is the way to do it. While the practical is more of understanding in the philosophical way. And the emancipatory or the critical action research is to ask questions and be able to put the more unwelcomed questions and see the unwelcome answer and do something about it. Sometimes it's not very confident to get this answer or to view what is happening by asking these questions. But I suppose that's the way you can learn about it and also be able to change it.
So in a nutshell, you're saying action research is about transformation and change?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to explain it. And that's what I can see of these teachers, specifically 2 teachers that went on for, I mean, they continue for 14 years now. And where it also has been taken up in the system, the district system, so that they really have got these conditions to be able to continue. And I think that's a good example. I don't have many more, but that's one I have followed. I think there are more,
yes,
but it's just it's not in my knowledge.
So one last question. From your experience over many years of using action research in a whole range of educational settings, what would you say are the 1 or 2 or 3 key features of action research?
Oh, that's a hard question, but I think one is really to come together. I think the collaboration part is the real important part, to collaborate with your colleagues and other teachers in the school.
Is that when you mean a communicative space? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes. So you have to organize or create these communicative spaces to be able to share and discuss your own teaching and what is happening in your classroom. The second one is the actions. I think that is really important, that you try different ways of changing your practice and see what is happening. So I would say the third one is the research, to follow up what is happening. I mean, teachers are really good, and you are taught to be good at planning and acting, but not as good as to be able to follow up these actions and reflect upon them. So I think it's the actions and the research and creating communicative spaces to be able to share and reflect on it.
Well, thanks, Karin. It's always interesting wherever you're based to hear different perspectives on action research. Karin and I and others went to Colombia last year and to an action research conference, and we heard some completely different understandings of what action research was about, and it was really interesting to see that it was much broader and comprehensive than we'd imagined. So I hope these conversations have been interesting for you as it has been for us, and we'll try and do some more videos, and we hope you get a chance to hear them again. Thank you.
Thank you.